What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Get Bucked for the Breeders' Cup. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson. And as usual, I get to be joined by my co-host, Jackson Muniz. Jackson, how's it going?
Going good, man. I'm going to try not to be too distracted. I know the draw is going on as we speak, so we're a little bit of multitasking here, but I think the most important races are out of the way outside of maybe the Classic. So
for the most part, I am just going to catch up on all the Breeders' Cup draw stuff once we're kind of done here. But obviously, we're talking all the sprints and then the turf mile today. So obviously, jam-packed full of programming. We get to be joined by Travis Stone here in just a few minutes, and then Matthew DeSantis 30 minutes after that. So we're going to have some excellent conversations. So far, talking about the post position draws, though, what are your thoughts on who got the best draw? And let's start with the Juvenile fillies.
Yeah, that's probably the race I'm most interested in on Friday, I think. And the horse I'm really interested in is the Japanese one, and she drew perfect in the outside post. Or she was the 9 horse, I think. All the main speed's drawn to her inside. She's very fast from what I understand. She's also a very big horse from what I understand. So I think that's probably best for her, that even if she doesn't break great, she'll be able to get into a rhythm and she won't have any trouble, because horses like that, I don't think they want to stop and start. They're just too big to do that. So she'll be in the clear the whole time, and we'll find out if she's good enough.
Yeah, without a doubt. Real quick, as we get into the other ones, no, actually, just kidding. How about the Juvenile?
The Juvenile, East Avenue, not good at all. I mean, that could not have gone worse, I don't think, for him, because you got the rail and then Baffert
getaway car right to the outside.
Then there's speed in the middle, and there's speed on the outside. It just, there's a lot of things happening that are all going to be slamming over on him. And he's going to have to do something he's never done before, which is great, and take some dirt while doing it. He's not going to be like Chancer, who's going to be in the clear the whole time. So he's got a tough task ahead of him.
Absolutely, he does. And that's going to be difficult to overcome. I loved where Gaming drew. I loved where Jonathan's Way drew. I think Gaming's going to set the perfect trip. I think Jonathan's Way has a chance to get down to the rail. Gaming right in the 2-path. He proved he could rate last time out, and then now he's going to set a beautiful trip. I don't know how he's going to set a bad one here.
Yeah, if he's 8-1, I'll be all over that. And I think he will be. I mean, I don't see how he's anything lower than the 4th choice in that race.
Yeah, lowest I could see is probably 6-1. Real quick, as we kind of get into the meat of what we are going to talk about today, want to announce the giveaway winner. That's Michael Saletta for guessing Brilliant Birdie. Paying $8.40, and Brilliant Birdie did in fact win, paying $8.18. So Michael, congratulations. If and when you see this, just shoot me a DM on X is probably the best way to get a hold of me, and then I will ship that book out to you. Congratulations. And while we're on that subject, second giveaway announcement here for book number 2 that we will be giving away. Pick the winner and the payout price of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Obviously, now we have the post positions drawn, so go ahead and leave that in the chat below. Again, winner and the payout price. Payout price is going to be the tiebreaker. Whoever gets closest gets a copy of A Better Way of Thinking, written by Matt Miller. Again, excellent stuff to read. So, without further ado, please, hit that subscribe button. And 1 second, our guest has just texted me there. So we're going to be bringing him on in just a second. We are going to talk Filly and Mare Sprint. We're going to talk the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We're going to talk the Turf Sprint, and then we're going to talk the Breeders' Cup Mile. That's the mile on the turf, not the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I don't know why they have the exact same name, but I don't know why every designation for the Breeders' Cup has turf except for the Turf Mile, and then the dirt has the Dirt Mile.
Well, because the mile was OG. It was one of the first original 7 races, and it's been there forever. And wow, next just drew the best case scenario, 14. That's perfect for him.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing.
Interesting. Sorry
that's amazing. No. Next is going to be a key play for me in some.
Could not have gone better.
Sure. Yeah, that is exactly where
there's 14 horses in the race.
Yeah, 14 in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That is superb. I cannot wait. So That's going to be excellent. We obviously, by the time we kind of have all of this done, we will have all of our post positions drawn, so we'll be able to get right into it. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my pleasure to bring on a guest who I have spoken with before. But Jackson, I believe you're going to meet him for the first time. He's the race caller at Churchill Downs. He's a handicapper, and he's going to help us along the way with all the Breeders' Cup sprints and the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile. That's Travis Stone. Travis, hey, welcome back.
What's up? How we doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Grinding away. A lot of replays.
Absolutely. Right before we get into the all this Breeders' Cup analysis, how was opening day at Churchill Downs yesterday with all the 2-year-olds?
It was good. It was good. I was most impressed by the 2 stakes winners. Obviously, Sovereignty looks to be of any type, but the filly as well. So ideally, we'll see them Thanksgiving weekend and Stars of Tomorrow too. And Sovereignty did very well, though. That was a nice looking stride for a horse that looks like he can run forever and overcame. I mean, it wasn't the fastest of paces in the world. So, yeah, he ran well.
Yeah, Sovereignty was probably the most impressive winner on that day for me, at least on the visual test, to run the way he did. And for a barn like Bill Mott, that was kind of cold the past few weeks or so, really exploded there and won emphatically. So to break the streak like that was something impressive to watch. But yeah. I'm sure you're tuned into this Breeders' Cup draw, so we won't waste any more time. First one we're going to talk about is going to be the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. This is how it drew here. We have a field of 10. That is a little bit small. I'll try and make that a little bigger here. But what'd you find interesting that came from this draw?
Speed. Inside, speed toward the outside too. Society's got one way to go, so I think this race will be no free ride on the front end for anybody. And it's a perfect draw for Ways and Means to just see how things develop to her inside and make a move when she needs to make a move at a track where it feels like that sort of trip does well. So, yeah, I mean, I'd have a hard time believing that she's going to have a bad trip from there. It's just whether or not she's good enough.
Absolutely. And the Filly and Mare Sprint is at 7 furlongs, while the boys will run at the flat 6. So that is a bit of a, odd configuration, maybe backwards how some would view it. You got the chance to call Zeitlos a couple times at Churchill Downs over the kind of summer and fall. What were your thoughts on this horse? He's rapidly improved since kind of turning back to that sprint distance.
I bet the last race that he was in at Keeneland and did not have her anywhere, I should say. And I felt like it sort of came from nowhere and maybe had been a product of the inside part of the track. I do, though, like to play horses that are going to come from off the pace and fast-paced races. And you don't necessarily have to key them on top either. It's okay if you take a stalker at I don't think Ways and Means will be 3-1, but 5-2, 3-1. And if you can round out that trifecta or superfecta with 20 or 30 to 1s, I'd like to pick up pieces late. There's far worse ways to play. And in fact, when we talk about the dirt sprint, I'll give you a couple of angles there of horses. So, I think not without chance, but probably one of those might have been the last time was the time to totally jump on board, but it's hard to argue with a horse that's in form.
Absolutely. Jackson, what are your thoughts there on the Filly and Mare Sprint draw?
No excuses for Ways and Means from that outside post. I mean, she's got Society to her inside, a couple of posts away. And, Skyla's not that quick in post 10. So, I mean, as long as Ways and Means break, she's going to have, like you guys mentioned, she'll be able to see everything that's happening to her left. It's a long run to the turn. I think she'll probably be lower than 5-2. It feels like there's a lot of buzz about her. She'll probably be a pretty big favorite, I would imagine. But no excuses for her. She got the best of the draw, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then a horse I think is interesting is one we just talked about. That was Zeitlos. I think that she's still improving rather, and maybe we haven't seen the best of her. Going 7 furlongs, Steve Asmussen can train him pretty well as North America's leading most winningest trainer. Getting to the Breeders' Cup turf sprint. This I thought the draw was rather interesting. You had 3 of the top speeds, obviously Cogburn probably being the most naturally quick, I'd say, drawing the 9 with Big Evs, who set the blazing, 20.7, I want to say, first quarter last year at Santa Anita, and then Brad Sell to the farther outside. What were your thoughts when this one drew out, Travis?
It's kind of an interesting situation for Cogburn because Big Evs is real speed. So ideally, you'd want to draw outside. But the reality is Cogburn, in my opinion, is just on a totally different level. Is arguably one of the best turf sprinters we've seen in the last 10 years. Maybe Golden Pal could sort of threaten it, but he did something that, first of all, I was sort of surprised that they went to Kentucky Downs with him. Bit of a goofier trip, if you will, a bit of a longer trip in a course that sometimes horses don't handle, but he obviously handled it just fine. So there's no concern about racetrack or situations that he's not going to be able to handle. He's just razor sharp. I liked the gap from the June race, Belmont weekend, to that race so that he's not quite as emptied out when it comes to the Breeders' Cup. So, and I feel like you get into these types of races, particularly this is 5 furlongs at Del Mar, right? Like it's real quick. Yeah, that's just, it's really tough for a lot to happen. It's not a quarter horse race, but it almost is. 5 furlongs, it's really tough to make up ground, particularly at Del Mar. So he's going to be very tough if he gets out of there. And I find myself every time there's these Breeders' Cups at Del Mar trying to get cute with horses to do different things, and just not much happens in a spot like this. So, not too keen on trying to beat him and being all that cute and smart. I back when he ran this summer and then when he ran at Kentucky Downs, I feel like he's on a different level, and I'm going to hold that opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jackson, I may have a bit of a contrarian view, but I want to see what your thoughts are here first.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's still the same. If he breaks on top, he goes with the field, he's going to win this thing. He's just better than these horses. From everything we've seen thus far, it is a little concerning that the 2 main speeds are drawn to his outside, but everything on his inside, I mean, they're all come from behind her. So as long as he breaks, he's just going to go straight to the rail, take a shortest path around, and good luck catching him.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought AG Bullet's interesting on the draw because he does have a lot of natural speed. I don't know if it's 5 furlong speed. Yeah, so that's the question that, I think Umberto knows there's pretty much one way to go. Obviously, he knows the turf course pretty well with riding at the Southern California circuit year round. So it's going to be interesting to see what AG Bullet does out of the gate and how he breaks. Obviously, Cogburn is the fastest horse to a half mile I can remember seeing. The race at Saratoga where he set the world record, he put the first quarter and second quarter in 21 and 3 or something like that, which is just unheard of. He ran 43.07 to the half in that race, and that's ridiculous. And
won by 4 against grade 1 sprinters. Yeah,
exactly. Big Evs, last year in the Juvenile went sub 21. He went sub 20.73 to the quarter, going 5 furlongs. So that's something to think about. But then, getting to the quarter, or getting to the half rather, Cogburn's going to catch up and be able to pass because he's just so quick. He's going to be tough to beat, but I mean, if he gets hung out more than 3 wide, which is going to be tough to see because a lot of the speeds to the outside might leave him a little vulnerable. I loved where Matorius drew. He finally got to the inside, which he, for whatever reason, struggles to get drawn inside. He's always the post 10 or 11 or 12. I think on Derby Day he was post 12, maybe 10 if I remember right. He was out there pretty wide, so it's good to see he's going to get a nice trip. Fresu has the mount, so that's going to be fun to see what he's able to do from that post there. What is that? Bradsell? Yeah, Bradsell at 7-2, drawn the far outside. I think probably got the worst of it. Not to say the obvious, but to be that out wide and have the other 2 speeds be inside of you, it's going to be tough to overcome that much in terms of, just overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Travis, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, ask Travis if there was a draw that you liked specifically in the Juvenile day there on Friday that stood out to you.
For the 2-year-old races, I think the draw in the Juvenile dirt is really interesting with East Avenue drawing the inside.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember the name of the horse right alongside of it, who's got speed.
Getaway car.
Yeah. there's just no way they're not going to go quick. I mean, they're both going to need to get position, and there's also no way that they're going to let East Avenue get away with an easy lead. So I would anticipate that race coming apart a little bit. Unfortunately, one of the ones, the McKinsey horse, I liked a little bit, no longer running. It was kind of a bummer. But I'm going to take and I haven't formed an opinion there. I am going to take a couple of stands, though. I'm going to try and beat East Avenue, totally respect him. His job just got a lot harder, though. And I'm going to try and beat Chancellor McPatrick, who I think at his price has more of the looks of a one-turn closer than really a horse that I feel is just going to continue to get and do this thing going farther and farther and farther. I'm a little bit softer on that opinion, though, with the way the race drew out, because they're just going to have to move in there. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, without a doubt. Chancellor McPatrick, I think, obviously is supremely talented, but I liked your point of better at the one turn. I think that configuration fits him a lot better. Just has that nice closing kick and, get some space down the stretch. Del Mar is going to be tough. Myself and a man named Noah Maher, we co-host a show on the HHH Racing channel. We went over the Del Mar track profile, and 9 of 11 routes in the past 2 Breeders' Cups there are won at the quarter pole. So from 2017 and 2021. So unless they kind of, get Chancer in around the far turn and get him right into contention within about, half a length, that's pretty much where the race seems to be won in those dirt routes. So that's going to be a big key, and that goes for pretty much everything.
Well, hopefully I really like that Japanese horse Shin Believe in there. I don't know if you watched his replay, but yeah. I mean, he had a good trip, but he looked really good, and he has a nice stride to him. So it felt like maybe he was kind of an interesting wild card. Hopefully he won't be as far out as Chancellor McPatrick. Hopefully he's quick enough to get in position on the far turn. Del Mar's got a very short stretch. You have to make moves on the turn. It's tough.
You do. The stretch is pretty short. It comes up rather quick. The finish line does. So it's going to be interesting to see the kind of, jockey tactics as they go, because Santa Anita definitely plays different. You have an extra, I don't know the exact distance, but probably around 100 yards or so, maybe a little more between finish lines there. So it's going to be interesting. One more horse I want to ask you about is they're drawing for the male sprint right now on dirt. So before we get to that one, so we can put the field up, next drew post 14 in the Classic. I think biggest point was we have 14 horses running in the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. I think that's fantastic for the sport. You've obviously gotten to see Next run and romp a few times now at Churchill Downs. What do you think of that post position? What do you think of his chances in the Classic?
I'm happy that he's running. I appreciate the sporting element of it. I wish him luck. I wouldn't bet him with my worst enemy's money. Dominating dirt marathons is just a totally different ballgame than our classic distance horses. I mean, he hasn't yet to see horses like Highland Falls and Fierceness and those types. It's just a totally different ballgame this time. That post, I did not know he drew post 14. He's even more of a toss to me now. But I wish him luck. I don't hate the horse. It's nothing like that. It's the Breeders' Cup, though. You got to take a stand. And I feel like the sort of notoriety and the conversation around him running in here is going to cause his odds to drift down a few points lower than they probably should. And I'm capable of rooting for horses and betting on others, and that's what we'll do.
Absolutely, yeah. I think those are great points you bring up here, as they have posted the field for the Breeders' Cup Sprint on dirt, and the morning lines are rather interesting. So this is the first time we're all going to be looking at it. It looks like your morning line favorite is Federal Judge from post number 3. I did not see that one coming. What are your kind of first opinions on this one, Travis? Because I know you let me know that you do have, some opinions rather in this one.
Yeah, well, that's a tough post for Raging Torrent, so he's going to have to go. Federal Judge has speed. Mulligan, that's a good post for Mulligan because he can sort of sit outside. Skelly has one way to go, so he's probably going to. They're going to go quick in here. That's just Raging Torrent drawing the rail makes this race really quick. And Don Frankie's not slow either, and neither is Straight No Chaser. This race is going to be wild. Absolutely wild on the front end. mean, how does Raging Torrent win now? I don't know. I like Raging Torrent's a very good horse. He ran really well in the spring. I was kind of worried that his last race, which was very gutsy in game, might have been sort of a tank emptying race because he was so sharp earlier in the year. That's just a brutal post. I guess if Federal Judge isn't favored, I think Mulligan would more likely be favored and probably is supposed to be favored. Yeah, I don't know. The more when I see this like starting it like this, I'm like, my gosh, how did they not go 20-4?
Yeah.
My creative opinions in here, and as I look at this now, I'm even more convinced this is how I'm going to play the race. I'm going to try and get Gun Pilot to run third or fourth. He will be 30-1. He has good races coming from off the pace, and his last couple are a little bit dirtied up in my opinion. And he's going to get the right sort of setup and the right sort of flow. So I'm okay with him. I think you can make the same case for Remake as a sort of a off the pace type consideration. And what's interesting to me is that Federal Judge and Nakatomi both come out of the same race, a race where Federal Judge got the best of it in a race that didn't really have much backward movement. And Nakatomi did try and make up a little bit of ground late. And I think he's an okay off the pace horse as well. But my wild idea, and that he's 30-1, I just find juicy. I don't think Ben Tornado is really all that far off some of the tops in here. I think he has had 2 good races in a row. He was very gutsy last time. He was under pressure the whole way. In the race 2 back, he sort of had to back off the pace and was forced wide on a track you don't really want to go wide on. And I just think he's going to be a sick overlay. So I don't know, maybe like we can hit the lottery and Gun Pilot and Ben Tornado can occupy 2 spots in the trifecta or something. Because I'm not overly sold on Skelly. Mulligan's fine. I have no problem with Mulligan. Straight No Chaser was much better last time, but I mean, how can you trust anybody that's going to be involved in this pace?
Yeah.
And I think Federal Judge is dressed up. Like, I'm fine trying to beat him. I liked Raging Torrent a little bit, but that's just a brutal post.
It is, yeah. Raging Torrent from that inside, the best you could kind of hope for maybe in this scenario is, break sharp and goes and then hope everybody else just sends so hard they cross and clear because he has, well, obviously all of the other speed is to the outside with him breaking on the rail. And then he maybe sits a little bit of a pocket, but I mean, even if that's the case, he's still pretty up against it from that inside post. I think the best drawing here, at least to my first kind of eye, would be Nakatomi. You mentioned that last race at Churchill that Jackson, you and I covered that as well. And we just thought this was kind of the prep race going in, or that was the prep race going into this race because he had the same sort of pattern last year, trained by Wesley Ward. And he can come from off the pace. He doesn't have to be a super deep closer, but I mean, yeah, you said sub 21, I think, to the quarter, Travis. And I definitely agree because they are going to absolutely sizzle on the front end with Straight No Chaser, Mulligan, Skelly, Raging Torrent from the rail. Federal Judge went to the lead last time.
Don Frankie.
Thank you. Yeah. Don Frankie is freaky speed. 15-1 is a nice price. And I'm happy you mentioned Gun Pilot as well. Gun Pilot ran a great race over Derby weekend and just has the ability to sit from, back behind the pace, make that one run. And I think, again, the 6 furlongs, that's a little shorter than I would have liked to see for this race. I mean, I wish they ran this race at 7 because I think that would really open it up to some chaos. But we've seen chaos in this race before with Aloha West winning for Wayne Catalano after they, sizzled up front back in 2021. So we've seen upsets happen. It's certainly possible. And I'm really curious to watch the betting board when this race opens up because I think there's going to be quite a bit of movement, at least from my first eye.
Yeah, I agree.
Jackson, what are your thoughts on the on how this race drew?
Well, my very first thought was I've been seeing posts for about a week now from many, many different sources saying that Skelly is your morning line favorite, and he's not even like I think he's a sixth choice on the morning line. So that's a little interesting to me. But I mean, how do they not fly? As you guys covered it pretty well. I mean, you got speed on the rail, you got speed in the middle, you got speed on the outside. This race just has Nakatomi written all over it, in my opinion. And if you can somehow get 6-1 on him, that's I don't even know if I'd make another bet the entire weekend. I would just save it all for him because he's the best closer in this race. Mulligan drew a really good post to get that stock and pound strip, but he just might be too close to the fast pace too. So I'm all Nakatomi in this race. I don't really need to handicap it too much.
Yeah, absolutely. After seeing the draw, I'm really in agreement. 2021, I had mentioned where Aloha West won. That was with Jackie's Warrior in there. There was a Japanese horse and some others, and they cooked on the front end. And I don't see this race going any different. This race is going to set up for one of those deep dead closers. It's just going to be a matter of which one can get there. Because again, that 6 furlong, and Travis, you mentioned it, the stretch comes up pretty quickly down at Del Mar. So Jackson, obviously, yeah, you and I know that track because that's our home track there. But that stretch is going to come up pretty quick, and it's going to be tough. But I think they're just gonna cook. There's so much speed in there that it's going to be next to impossible for a horse to win on the lead and maintain that the entire way around there.
Yep.
I think they have drawn the mile. Let me just pull this up really quick. Everything's getting just kind of posted.
The stream crashed at one point. I guess it's back up.
It did.
It was down for a minute.
Unfortunately, I can't post the stream on here because I'll get copyrighted. But I'm pretty sure this is okay. At least they haven't told me otherwise yet. So this is the field and the draw for the FanDuel Breeders' Cup Mile. Upon first look here, Ramatoile, I believe, down on the rail. I did not see this horse being 5-1. That was a surprise for the morning line. Travis, do you have any kind of first thoughts on this, and do you have any thoughts in general?
I mean, if More Than Looks is 20-1, what race is this after? This is after the
sprint, I believe.
Is after the sprint, yes.
Oh man, okay. Now things are getting interesting because I would kill to be alive to More Than Looks after some horses if this horse can be close to 20-1. I mean, get out of here. No way.
Yeah.
No way. I like More Than Looks. I've been chasing More Than Looks all year long. I thought ran the best race last time, despite the fact the horse lost. Carl Spackler got away with some pretty soft fractions for a grade 1. More Than Looks was motoring home late. My only concern is, we talked about it on the dirt. The turf's even worse. It's just a much, much, much shorter run in. So you're going to really have to get going early, and hopefully this horse doesn't have too much to do late. But yeah, he was going to be a big time key for me. And that's a really tough post for Carl Spackler.
That is, it's so tough on first look. In fact, I might not even use him anymore. I love Carl Spackler, but I mean, that is tough. We know how valuable it is to save ground at Del Mar. Yeah. The only horse I can think of in recent years that's won from a post at that was Master of the Seas. And that was at Santa Anita. So those turns are a little more forgiving. Del Mar is, I mean, they're not. Those turns are sharp. With the rails down, obviously, you have to save a lot of ground. You have to be able to make that one run. And I don't know if Carl Spackler is going to be able to do that just because he typically likes to be more forward. So that might leave him parked out a little too wide.
Yeah, that's a tough post for him.
That is. Jackson, what were your kind of first thoughts looking at this field?
Carl Spackler obviously is that's tough for him, but I'm just really glad that Goliath drew into this field because he'll ensure that they're going to go pretty quick in this spot, which may not have been the case prior, but he's going to open up 3 lengths, I would imagine, for Pratt. I mean, that's his only chance is to do what he did at Kentucky Downs. So the pace is going to be hot enough. I thought Diego Velasquez got a pretty good post in here. I still need to do a little more work on these zeros, but from what I understand, he's a horse that is somewhat tactical. So if he can be pretty close, maybe get that Space Blues trip from that inside draw, then he could be interesting at 8-1.
I like the Space Blues drop reference. Way to go on that one. Quick note on Diego Velasquez, as I've been doing kind of my work, and obviously I'm on the HHH Racing podcast, and they did a show with a man named Davey Lane, who's an excellent punter over in Europe. And, obviously the breeding kind of speaks for itself with being at acclimation. That's a miler on the bottom side. But they've pointed this horse here for this spot. So that tells me a lot. They're going to keep this horse in training for next year from what I understand, but they didn't take too much out of him in that last effort where they stayed overseas. They were going to ship to Kentucky Downs. I believe he was possibly entered. And then once at Saratoga, but they ended up not shipping. They ended up saving him. They ran him in a group 2, and now they're bringing him over, and this was always the target for this horse, and then they're going to bring him back again next year. So that tells me that this horse is going to be sitting on go for this effort, and I mean anywhere close to 8-1, that seems like an absolute gift. I got to be honest. So 8-1, I love to see. And then, yeah, Travis, you mentioned More Than Looks being 20-1 is ridiculous. That's More Than Looks has no business being anywhere close to that. That turn of kick that he showed last time running against Carl Spackler, who you mentioned set some pretty soft fractions and then kind of just kicked away, had the whole trip his own way. More Than Looks made up all of the ground. More Than Looks was dead last basically the entire way around the track and made a move and came flying down the stretch, and Carl Spackler only ended up winning by, I think, less than 2 lengths, if my memory serves correct. But More Than Looks has a wicked turn of foot, and I think that's going to be a big key horse for me. Probably underneath and definitely somewhere on top, because he's got all the talent in the world.
I'm used to him not quite winning, so that'll
got to get those reverse tri keys in play, as that's a way to get, that I'll get some value, try and find some. Chili Flag is the last horse I want to talk about. Drew Post 2 here. And again, Travis, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. I really do appreciate it. Chili Flag was really good, in the spring of this year. I want to say won the race at Churchill Downs on Derby Day. Forgive me for forgetting the name of that race, but was one of like
mile.
Thank you.
Yep.
Was one of 4 Chad Browns that race and got home at 9-2 with IRAD on board. I only know the odds because I bet Chili Flag that day, and then has just not really run back to any of those efforts coming out of there. Jackson, I'll swing to you first. What were your thoughts, if any, on Chili Flag in here? Ridden by IRAD, 20-1 by Chad Brown on the turf.
I just think she's a cut below these. I mean, her best asset is her big turn of foot, and in that category, I usually turn to the Euros for that. They're just a little bit faster late than she is. I mean, at least she does have the rail. Maybe she can just hug it the entire way around, but she just seems a little outmatched in this spot.
Yeah, certainly could be. I think is unmatched, even though winning a grade 1 in the Just a Game at Saratoga, probably still, a cut below. Travis, Porta Fortuna was also a talented horse, ran in last year's Breeders' Cup. Do you have any thoughts on Porta Fortuna here? He drew the 7, which is pretty
one thing I'll say about Chili Flag is that it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to close at Churchill and Saratoga, where the stretch is much longer and there's more time to get going. The equalizer there might be IRAD, for what it's worth, because he's not afraid to try and pick through traffic, and he has a good sense of pace, so maybe he gets her going earlier. Because the horse can be a huge price. I'd hate to see like IRAD weaving through the pack and nailing third at a big number and not having a piece of that. Porta Fortuna is fine. I mean, the one thing I think when it comes to these Euros, and I've said this for years, is it's really easy to just throw a blanket over them and just assume that they're all good, that they're all the ones you got to take and what have you. She obviously likes the firmer going, and so I would certainly put her in the mix as being the one to beat from the group. I mean, she beat the horse from the inside a few times there, at least twice this year, I believe. So totally logical contender. Won't be surprised if Porta Fortuna wins and More Than Looks runs a good second. That sort of scenario.
Absolutely. I'm looking for More Than Looks to certainly finish somewhere underneath, because I think that's probably the most talented horse at a great number there. So that's one of the horses I'm most looking forward to running now that I see where he drew and what those morning line odds are, because again, that is just ridiculous. Travis, I really do want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy handicapping schedule as we get ready for Breeders' Cup here. And obviously your Churchill Downs meet that just got underway this past Sunday. You mentioned Future Stars Day number 2 is the day before Thanksgiving?
No, day after Thanksgiving is the Clark, and then the Saturday is Stars of Tomorrow 2. We run the two-year-old races, Kentucky Jockey Club and the Goldenrod. It's a great week of racing in Kentucky.
It absolutely is. I was thrilled as a handicapper to see there were turf races too this past weekend. Those are always fun to handicap at Churchill Downs, because that turf course obviously plays different than most, and you have the long stretches you mentioned, so there's plenty of time for those closers to kind of get it into gear. But yeah, once again, Travis, thanks so much for joining us. Take care. Best of luck for the Breeders' Cup.
You too. Good luck this weekend. We'll see you.
Thank you. All right, that was Travis Stone with some excellent analysis as we have our next guest waiting in the wings here. Obviously, another guest I'm very excited to speak with again. He provided some very excellent insight the first time I had him on with the Gallop out. We were doing some Naira races on the Travers Day card. I believe we went, I want to say it was the early races on Travers Day. Maybe he can help me out. But without further ado, our guest for the next half, that's Matthew DeSantis. How's it going, Matthew? Oh, can't hear you. Might be muted. Nope.
I was also on mute.
There we go. Matthew, can you hear us? I can't hear you. It's okay. He'll get that settled in a minute, but it's okay.
So the Dirt Mile got 14 horses. That is another one that's going to be talk about a short run. Mile 16th is a short run at Del Mar.
Yeah,
the Dirt Mile is even shorter, and there's 14 horses in that field. So
14 horse field.
Good luck.
Yeah, that is a lot. And yeah, Jackson, you and I know well that mile comes up real quick on the dirt at Del Mar, and that's going to be certainly something. Matthew's going to get his audio figured out. He will join us here in a second, but obviously some great analysis from Travis Stone. Real quick, while we have this time, and now that we're rolling, giveaway winner, that's Michael Saletta, guessing Brilliant Birdie, and got the closest on the pod there. So reach out via direct message on X, and we will get you situated with that book. We'll ship it over to you. Congratulations, Michael. But yeah, now I think the draw is complete, which is nice. So we have, sorry, I had to sneeze. We have everything drawn now. We will bring up the Filly and Mare Sprint one more time, just as we, I meant to keep us on the screen. I'm all over the place. We're getting there. You know, we have today, we have tomorrow. Actually, I guess I'll take this time to plug tomorrow's show. Tomorrow, we're going live at 4 p.m. now that everything's kind of settled. We'll have a full day basically looking at the full all-access past performances. So I'm excited to get a look at that. And then, yeah, we get Matt Dinnerman for the first 30 minutes. That's going to be exciting. Second time I get to talk with him. And then special guest Matt Bernier from NBC and FanDuel. I'm excited that he's going to be able to join us. We're going to deep dive into those big 5 races. That's the Filly and Mare Turf, the Breeders' Cup Turf, the Distaff, and of course the Classic, and the Dirt Mile as well. That Jackson, you just mentioned, drew 14 horses, which is, I mean, that's ridiculous.
And I think the 3 favorites drew in the outer half, so it's going to be interesting in that race for sure. I mean, that first quarter mile is going to be fascinating. They are going
to be sizzling. In fact, while we have the time, we might as well just put up the Dirt Mile here just to kind of see what everybody got. Here we go. Yeah, 14 horses, as Jackson mentioned. Let me just crop this picture real quick. Maybe. Okay. I think I did it. Matthew will be back in just a second. But here's the Big Ass Fans Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Yeah, you have 14 horses. I was not expecting 14 horses. That is incredible. We have Muth at 9-2. You have at the far outside post 14 Skippy Longstocking. And then you have down on the rail, you have Saudi Crown. So and then post number 6, I didn't even see him because 10-1 on the morning line on Seize the Gray, a 2-time Grade 1 winner this year. Jackson, what are your first thoughts on this?
I might be getting my Japanese horses mixed up. Isn't Tio St. Dennis your horse from Derby Day that just a speedball? Am I wrong about that?
Yes, Tio St. Dennis is also an absolute speedball.
Okay, so you have Saudi Crown, who is just a complete rocket ship. You have Tio St. Dennis, who is a complete rocket ship. And you have Fulcerano, who is a complete rocket ship. Posts 1, 2, and 3. They're all going to just fire out of there. And then after that, it's going to be a chaotic race. Like that is interesting. And that's the last race of the BCBC as well. So
that is 14 horse field to end the Breeders' Cup betting challenge. That is incredible. And now we're welcoming back Matthew DeSantis. Matt, how's it going? We can hear you loud and clear now.
It's going well. We're on the phone. The laptop's been on all day. I think it just decided, listen, it saw some of the morning lines and said, listen, I'm done with this. We're just not even going to try anymore. So But yeah, pleasure to be on with you guys. Excited to talk about some great races and some really obviously thrilling fields. I think some great opportunities for value across the board, across both days.
Absolutely. Definitely some opportunity for some really, really good value in here. We're going to start off with the Filly and Mare Sprint going 7 furlongs at Del Mar. You see the post positions here. Drew a field of 10. Your morning line favorite, Ways and Means, draws to the second to the outside at 5-2. Scylla, I'm just noticing, is 10-1 on the morning line. That seems maybe a touch too hot for her. What were your thoughts when you saw the field, and what do you like here, Matthew?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind. First, I would say Society is a bet against for me. That's a horse that always seems to just need the absolute perfect setup and the perfect trip. If she doesn't get it, she's just a horse that's teased with talent before. I mean, I remember being at Parks a couple of years ago when she won the Cotillion, and I thought, man, here comes a monster. And she just, at times will flash that, obviously winning the Ballerina in really impressive fashion, but also just had the exact perfect setup that day. Ways and Means, I get why she's the favorite, 5-2, but still, she's going against older. That Gallant Bloom last time out was not exactly the toughest field of older horses that she faced over a muddy, sloppy track up here at Aqueduct. And, I think there's some questions about whether or not she is going to be good enough to compete with more battle-tested horses like Vava. I do think Scylla's really interesting. I know she drew the far outside post, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, although in these 7 furlong sprints, you have more than enough time to work your way over to save ground going into the far turn. 10-1 seems like a gift. I think you'll probably end up getting closer to 6-1, but she's one who I just, Ryan, I'm interested in this because there are certain trainers like a Bill Mott that when they place a horse in a race that is a little surprising, you take notice. And if you remember, Scylla ran against Adair Manor back this summer out in California, and then and ran second that day. Didn't disgrace herself at all. And Bill Mott runs her back across the country in Saratoga on 3 weeks rest in the Ballerina. She runs second to Society, beats Vava. That just told me that Bill Mott thinks he's got something really special and hasn't run her since, which means I think he thinks she's sitting on a big race. So I think at 10-1, she's one from a value standpoint I'm absolutely interested in including on my tickets. But this is going to be a really good addition because I think those top 4 horses, Vava, Society, Ways and Means, and then Scylla, really do present some interesting value. And Zietlo's obviously coming from off the pace a little bit for Steve Asmussen.
Absolutely. Yeah. The move seemed very intentional by Bill Mott, to your point there. Coming out here, getting a run on the track, seeing that Scylla clearly handled it. Mike Smith that day, that wasn't the biggest field, but they gave Adair Manor all she could handle in that race. They kept her pinned in. That was a very, very excellent jockey race from the other runners. But Scylla just kind of went out to the lead and looked doing pretty good. Just looked like maybe that wasn't her best distance. And then, yeah, you mentioned Bill Mott wheels her back less than 3 weeks rest, or around 3 weeks rest, which is pretty unusual for him. He normally, kind of takes his time between races, but wheels her back in that spot in the Ballerina, runs an excellent second to Society, who's your second choice on the morning line here. Beats Vava, who is your third choice on the morning line here, and you get 10-1 on Scylla, who has been rested since that effort, trained up here, and now draws pretty cozy 10 post here. The 7 furlongs, you have the entire length of the backstretch. That's plenty of space to get over. You have Mike Smith back aboard, which I like to see. That was the rider in the Clement L. Hirsch out at Del Mar this summer, and I think that was one of the best rides I've seen Scylla get, just in terms of positioning and putting her in the best spot to succeed. So yeah, 10-1 anywhere close to that is tremendous value on a horse that is obviously a full sib to Tacitus and a full sibling to
Batten Down, I think, right?
Batten Down. Thank you. I was going to say Arthur's Ride, and I was like, that's not it. It's the other gray.
The other Mott, yeah.
Yes, and then Ways and Means, I think, is the most talented, but as you mentioned, just kind of hasn't faced the same company and hasn't been, as battle tested, I believe is the phrase you used, with all of these, proven and near dominant sometimes grade 1 winners like Society, and Zietlo's is still improving, and Vava, who is battling Alva Star the entirety of the spring there.
Yeah, I think that's like I said, a very good field, very competitive field. I think you can get a nice price depending on what your opinion is on this. And Yeah, I just think, Scylla presents a little bit of value. And if you go back and look at the past performances, Ryan, to your point, her one-turn races are her best races. And I know that from a pedigree standpoint, people will go, well, she's bred for distance, being a half to being the full to Tacitus and Batten Down. But, at some point, the horse tells you what the horse wants to do. And to your point, that Clement L. Hirsch, she just couldn't kind of get the distance on the front end. So what do? You cut her back, and she has the versatility. She can come from off the pace, multiple graded stakes winner. So she's interesting to me, and but going to be a fun race. I mean, it's a talented group. This is one of the better divisions, I think, year in and year out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a deep and competitive field always, and this race being 7 furlongs is always ripe for a horse to come from off the pace. As speed favoring as Del Mar is, that 7 furlongs, that's still, you can't run that like a sprint. That's almost a short route. You can't run it with 6 furlong speed because you will tire and you will get caught. And Scylla, I think, is going to have the foundation from those 1 1/16 2-turn efforts to be able to have that finish and have the air in her lungs to get done. A horse I want to talk about that is improving before we move on to the turf sprint is One Magic Filly, who was 10-1 on the morning line, which is surprising. Drew post number 2, trained by Phil D'Amato, romped and I can say beat Sweet Azteca, who would. I mean, she pulled out of this race, so clearly something went wrong. So hope she trains up and recovers and is all right. But One Magic Filly, I think, still maybe wasn't getting beat that day. She looked phenomenal. I don't know the kind of trip she's going to get from the 2-hole. I don't know. Clearly, she hasn't faced this caliber of horses, whether it's field size or just pure talent. But I think this is a horse with some really good raw ability who's still kind of figuring out who she is and how good she is. So maybe it's a situation where she can, get something underneath, whether that's 3rd or 4th. Not sure she could do too much better than that, but I think you'll get better than 10-1 on that line.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And she's one of the other things I try to emphasize when looking at these races is I do give a little bit of home field advantage to those West Coast horses, just more familiar with the settings, didn't have to travel, can just, be comfortable and stay in their daily routines. As well as horses travel, it is something that can be new for some of them. And, first time, for instance, domestic products ever gone out to the West Coast. That's actually one of the reasons I like Scylla, because she's traveled out to the West Coast before and we've seen her run well. So, having those West Coast horses just be able to stay in their own routines, not have anything interrupted. Phil D'Amato, I mean, come on, one of the best out there and one of the best anywhere. So that's good value if you can get it. And I agree, kind of a nice underneath play for a horse that is improving.
Yes, without a doubt. And you mentioned kind of the horse for course importance that Del Mar presents. And I think that's the most prevalent in our next race, and that is the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, because those tight turns, the flat and sharp 5 furlong turf sprint that is at Del Mar. I mentioned the tight turns, obviously. So you don't want to be out too wide. And your 3 main speeds with Bradsell, Big Evs, and of course the horse to beat Cogburn are drawn 9, 11, and 12 respectively. What was your kind of first take on this draw?
Yeah, I think it was, my first take was Bradsell really got the worst of it. That was a horse that I was really interested in, kind of the top European turf sprinter, and thought, that he could be an interesting alternative to Cogburn. In general, I'm trying to beat Cogburn in this race. Turf sprints, I usually just have a hard time taking chalk. Much to the chagrin of Golden Pal for all those years, who kept beating me, and Caravelle, who she kept beating me as well. But it just in turf sprints, this, especially with that flat 5, if you break just a quarter step slow, not even a half step slow, this thing can be over before it starts for some of these horses. So the other angle that I know has made their rounds on social media, and I've certainly talked about it, is the Kentucky Downs angle. That horses that do their final prep at Kentucky Downs are 0-4 since 2013 at the Breeders' Cup. Quite simply, prepping at Kentucky Downs is not a winning angle. The last race Cogburn ran at Kentucky Downs. So is Cogburn good enough to overcome this streak of 10 straight years where no horse from Kentucky Downs has won? Maybe. But it's one of those things where at 7-5 and potentially even a shorter price than that, I'm not willing to kind of find out. I do think, Believing is an interesting horse on the inside rail, and that presents its own issues, certainly. But that's one that was always kind of right behind Bradsell overseas. and is a very, very good horse in his own right. And at 12-1, I think could present, fantastic value. And Charlie Appleby's Star of Mystery at 10-1, I think also presents tremendous value as well. I got to see her up close and personal at Saratoga. And one of the funnier stories was Junior Alvarado coming off the track after running second with Mansa Musa in that race. And he goes up to Bill Mott. And Bill just, he's not upset or anything. Mansa Musa ran a huge race to run second that day. And Junior goes, I was in the turn and everything was going good. And then, Jesus, this other horse just came flying right by me. And so, he thought he was in perfectly good spot. And he was. She's just better. And so sometimes you just got to tip your cap. But the other one, I'd be remiss, people my age, I'm a little bit older, Duran. Maybe some people think of it as the notorious, BIG. But anytime I can go, Motorious, come on. I love that horse. So out in the West Coast. So 8-1 there for the D'Amato runner. And it's a good race. I'm going to try to beat Cogburn, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm leaning to beat Cogburn too, especially with that post. I think AG Bullet is going to send hard from the inside. I think that's going to leave Cogburn at least 2 wide. And that's enough for me to be all right not using him. Just because it's a 5 furlong sprint. You said it best. You don't like taking chalk. I don't like taking chalk in there either. A couple horses that I wanted to mention that one was the number 7 Howard Wallowitz, who drew into the field. That's a very talented horse, and I don't think we've seen the best of that horse quite yet. And Flavian Pratt is on to ride. That's a pretty decent post from the 7. Gonna be able to save enough ground, and maybe we haven't seen the best of this horse. We saw No Balls win last year, given that was at Santa Anita, but that was from the 1 post. So that was, again, just saving ground is important there. Sorry about that. And then Motorious drawing post 2, I think, is really interesting, as you mentioned, with the Biggie lyrics. Just drawing inside of the 8 or 9 post. I was just looking in the past 5 races that Motorious has run in with a field of 8 or higher. He has not been drawn inside the 8. He drew post 3. He drew post 3 2 races back, but it was a 7-horse field. So I'm not counting that in the statistics. But if you want to do, I'm surprised he didn't draw out to 7. But Motorious gets to save ground. This is his home track. He loves Del Mar. Fresu's an excellent turf rider out here who's out here regularly. So that's going to be a horse that's going to be interesting to see. Believing in Ryan Moore, I mean, we saw Auguste Rodin last year. We saw the ride Ryan Moore gave. Oh, I forget who won the Pegasus Turf, but also came right up the rail. So, Ryan Moore clearly loves the rail. I'd have to imagine from the 1 hole he's going to stick to it.
Yeah, and Ryan Moore knows something that's very important, which is North American jockeys have vacated the rail in every single race since about 1994. Nobody protects the rail anymore at all, much to my chagrin. And you're exactly right. That was the difference last year in the Breeders' Cup Turf between Auguste Rodin and Up to the Mark, because that was a close finish, and the difference was Ryan Moore hugged the rail knowing that it was going to open up. It did. Up to the Mark goes 4 wide. That's the difference. Nice seeing you folks. Remember to tip your waiters and waitresses on the way out. I mean, that's just you just have to know. And when Ryan Moore comes over, he just schools American jockeys. I mean, on the turf, it's just stunning. So you got to give a horse like that, I think, a lot of chance, just because the jockey's going to give that horse the perfect ride. You just know it.
Absolutely. And something that I think the West Coast tracks primarily have, that I know Aqueduct has it, but it's the turf chute that we use for those kind of mile and a 16th, mile and 8th. That opens up that entire section for, around 30 yards, I believe. Yeah. But, Southern California turf riders and riders in North America in general love to vacate the rail, as you pointed out. And especially with that gap there, that gives you a perfect opportunity to shoot through. And Ryan Moore showed us how he takes advantage of that last year at Santa Anita on the ride with Auguste Rodin, keeping the U.S. off of the number 1 spot with maybe not the best. I mean, the best horse gets the best ride with Auguste Rodin, but Up to the Mark was a sensational U.S. bred horse.
It really was.
To beat Master of the Seas, on the square, the way he did at Keeneland, that is something that is not done easily. Last horse I want to talk about in this field, just because of the rider who is probably the best turf sprint rider in the country. That's number 3 Arzak. For Michael Trombetta, I believe, is the trainer. I think outmatched based on talent, but we've seen Rosario do things in turf sprints where he's gonna take a risk. Maybe he runs up on heels, maybe he gets into trouble, but if he finds a path there, if he's at the top of the stretch and he's able to finish, I mean, there's no one.
Yeah.
There's very few jockeys I think I'd like finishing in a turf sprint more than Joel Rosario.
It's funny you say that, Ryan, because I was talking to my roommate, Sarah Obadwi, who works at Naira as well. And as soon as Arzak popped up on the screen at 30-1, I said, wow, there's the Joel Rosario special. I said, that's, I said, he'll make you pull your hair out with a 6-5 favorite that he rates back to last. But that it's when he wins at 30-1 that you just go, my God, this man's brilliant. And he is. He's capable of amazing things. I will say, Arzak being 30-1, in my opinion, is another reason to play against Cogburn. In that you could argue Arzak's maybe the best horse Cogburn's beaten. I mean, maybe Star of Mystery, but there's maybe the second best horse that Cogburn's beaten this year, and that horse is 30-1. The turf sprint division in this country is not that strong, and it is very, very top heavy. I think that's another reason to be cautious of Cogburn, certainly as your favorite, just the level of competition he's faced.
Yes, without a doubt. I think that is a great point. Cogburn maybe hasn't beaten, those top sprinters are the best of the best. He hasn't faced the largest fields other than the one at Saratoga, which I think was about 10 deep. And then he set the world record there, but he got a pretty nice trip. I mean, he just did that, he just set a world record for running. But but that being said, he's just kind of blown the doors off of, A minuses and B's, and he faces a field full of A's and B pluses in here. And Arzak is a talented horse, but there are some others that are real menaces, for lack of a better word, that he's going to be facing. And he does have some outside speed to contend with in the likes of Big Evs, who went sub 21 last year in the juvenile turf sprint. And now Cogburn's the fastest horse to a half mile I think I've ever seen with 43 flat kind of speed. But if he can get he could get crossed if a horse goes 20, sub 21 like that. I don't know that Cogburn's that quick out of the gate or just that quick, naturally. Big Evs is very compact and explosive and just kind of gets out to that lead. But Cogburn has obviously all the ability and is the horse to beat. But I think in a turf sprint, that's where you beat these favorites.
It is. And I was at Keeneland in 2022 when Golden Pal was, supposedly going to be, it was a coronation, it was going to be the last race. Everybody knew it. It was, just kind of a celebration. And, he blew the break. I mean, didn't take long. And Caravel got the perfect ride and 42-1. Here you go. And so you never know what happens in these turf sprints. And that's a great point about Big Evs. That horse was a freak last year. I mean, I believe set the Breeders' Cup Juvenile turf record last year, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the fastest time for that race. And so in the Breeders' Cup, which is admittedly a small history for that particular race, but still, you're right. Speed is speed, and that one has it.
Yes, absolutely. I don't have the course record or the race record in front of me, but that sounds right. I know it was close, if not on it, or breaking it. Next race that I want to get to is, if it brings up, the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We're going 6 furlongs. This one for the boys. You have two of the top two choices being Federal Judge and Mulligan, both trained by I believe those are Windstar Farm stilts. So you got to like their chances. Federal Judge being the morning line favorite, I did not see coming. I'm not sure if maybe you saw that coming, Matt or Jackson, but I have a feeling based on the laugh that was a no.
No, not really. I did. He certainly exits with, I think, maybe the highest buyer speed figure in the field with a 106. So maybe in that regard, I did see it coming. That said, there is a slew of speed in this race. I mean, it's a 6 furlong sprint. I get it. But you look at Federal Judge, Mulligan, and Straight No Chaser. Those horses have one way to win, which is go. Now, Mulligan has shown some versatility in the past to be able to sit second, third in some races and be able to rate off. But that's a tough one. And then Skelly on the far outside. That horse likes to go straight to the front. Now, Skelly at 8-1, I was prepared to kind of come on here and go, you got to play against Skelly. I don't know. Skelly at 8-1's a little interesting, I think, at least. Even if that horse seems to have developed some minor gait issues, like just it kind of breaks a little odd, sometimes breaks back and then comes forward and rushes up and just kind of gets beat there at the end. So this is a really competitive field. And I'll be honest, a horse that I wrote to you about earlier that I think is interesting, and I was maybe pleasantly surprised to see his morning line price, was Ben Tornado, who is a huge long shot in this race at 30-1 for Jose D'Angelo, but is coming off a win last time out down at Parks. And this is a horse that has not really done much wrong. And really the only bad effort was going a mile and a 16th, which the horse clearly didn't want to do. Otherwise, goes over and runs in the Saudi Cup and only finishes third behind Hello, Bookham Dano, Grade 1 winner, and Forever Young, who's one of your top choices in the Breeders' Cup Classic, going a mile. So this horse now is third back from running overseas, third back in the form cycle, 30-1. I don't know. I mean, the crazier things have happened, and the horse knows how to sit from off the pace a little bit. So if there's going to be all that speed up front with Federal Judge and Mulligan and Skelly and Straight No Chaser, I don't know. Why not take a shot with something that's 30-1? But you know it better than I do, Ryan. It's Del Mar. Sometimes it's just as quick as who's the fastest into the turn.
Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. You have a race like the 2021 Breeders' Cup Sprint at Del Mar where you had Jackie's Warrior, who's supposed to be speed to speed and supposed to just run off the screen. That was his swan song. And he gets, chewed up on the lead with two other horses going with him. I believe a Japan horse or a Japanese horse and one other that I'm blanking on. And then you have Aloha West for the Catman, screaming down at the finish with Dr. Scheibel, and you have a huge upset in there. So I think even though this race is a flat 6 furlongs, it still makes for an upset because if they go too fast, you can absolutely catch them. It just really does come down to who gets the best trip and who's able to kind of tip out first and get that first run because that stretch at Del Mar isn't the longest. A couple points on the draw that I think one was a negative was Jackson and I spoke with Shane O'Neill, obviously of the Doug O'Neill team, about Raging Torrent, and we liked him coming into this spot, but drawing the rail is really tough going 6. And then the next one that I like is, and Jackson, I'll let you speak on this one as well, is the number 4, Nakatomi, for Wesley Ward in a sprint like this. Jackson, I know you have some thoughts, so go ahead.
No, I just think, you have speed on the rail, you have speed in the middle, you got speed on the outside. And when you have that situation, it's a lot harder to see where everyone else is at because they all are going to try to gain early position, and they're all going to go way too fast. And this is probably the best closer in the field. He's already shown he can do it. Yeah. Maybe people are fading that last race because he got beat pretty bad by a Federal Judge, but that was probably a speed bias racetrack. It was a little too far back. It doesn't need to be that far back. And this is the race they've been prepping for. He's not trying to win the Phoenix at Keeneland. He's trying to win the Breeders' Cup Sprint where he was third last year. So this has been the target all along since Dubai. I already mentioned, I think 6-1 is a phenomenal price on him as the best closer in this race. And he does have the fastest numbers on his best day. So I love him at 6-1.
I hear you on that, Jackson. He's a great horse coming from off the pace. And with the amount of speed in this race, he's going to be able to do it. I was up there at Saratoga and he won the Alfred G. Vanderbilt and, beat Skelly in that race. And looks so good doing it too. And he's a horse that sometimes, he struggled to win occasionally. He's always been a hard knocking horse, always shows up and runs his race. But that was a real breakthrough, I felt like, in that Alfred G. Vanderbilt, which was, obviously that getting that Grade 1. And also, come on, I mean, how does a horse named Nakatomi not like it in Southern California after being named after Nakatomi Towers out in Los Angeles in the original Die Hard? So I think this one, listen, you fade Wesley Ward in sprints at your own peril. And I agree with you. 6-1's a really nice price on that horse.
Yeah, without a doubt. I like the post. Obviously, Tyler G, awesome rider. A lot of the riders are coming out on Thursday, and they have a handful of mounts. I have to look through the entries again. I'm not sure if Tyler's out on Thursday, but I know Irad's out here. I believe Joel is out here, Johnny V. So they're just going to kind of get a couple runs over the track, which is something I like to see. But one thing that kind of worries me about Nakatomi is Federal Judge and Don Frankie both have sensational speed, or at least are going to the lead in this race. So I'm worried maybe Nakatomi could get pinched a little bit if they really, hustle out of there and if anything like that happens. But I mean, that could happen pretty much anywhere. So if the race sets up, Nakatomi, as you mentioned, hard knocking, hard trying horse. If this horse isn't on top, this horse is going to be second or third. I'll probably use this horse on top, maybe in a couple doubles, and then just reverse try key to kind of hedge against, because Nakatomi's got to be somewhere at the finish. I don't think there's a chance they go above 44 and 44 for the half.
Oh yeah,
like I don't like. And if they go sub 44, which again I do believe they will, because Straight No Chaser will do that on his own. Let alone if you add in Skelly and Mulligan and Federal Judge, everybody that we've talked about. So I think they're going to fly, and I think it sets up for a closer. Last one I want to mention here is Gun Pilot. Travis Stone had some thoughts on this horse. Obviously came from off the pace on Derby weekend to finish nicely. Gun Pilot has a great kind of post to be able to kind of sit behind all this speed, tip out, and come home. And Christian Torres, I love to see that he gets the mount. Definitely deserving with how well he's ridden this horse and just how well he's done.
Yeah, I definitely like to see, jockeys keep their mounts when they've done a good job in these sorts of spots. And this is, listen, it's the only way as a jockey you're ever going to improve is if you get a shot in these types of big races. And, that effort second and in the forego last time, listen, Mulligan just ran them off their feet. I mean, that was just a perfect trip, and he was just able to get kind of clear and was able to get really a perfect ideal trip. And Gun Pilot was in chase mode the entire time, but he ran down everybody else in that race. And I thought ran really well in that forego to really kind of back up that big effort and big speed figure that he put up in the Churchill Downs Stakes going 7 furlongs. So, maybe he's better at 7 than a flat 6, but, he's 2 for 3 winning at 6. So he can get the job done there, and has that sort of versatility. Again, if they go too fast, to your point, can come from off the pace.
Definitely. And I think a lot of you mentioned the probably likely better at 7. And I think that's the case with a good handful of these in this sprint. However, I think a lot of that has to do with 7 furlong races around the country typically draw 6 furlong sprinters because there's not many 7 furlong specialists. So but when you get in a situation like the Breeders' Cup, they're going to go way too fast up front in a race like this where there's 5 confirmed speeds. Even just with Don Frankie and Straight No Chaser and Skelly, that's 3 that they have one way of going. Japan, of course, comes with intention. We've seen them send hard and send fast multiple times, and they have another entrant in Remake in there who has some tactical speed. So you can expect Don Frankie to go to the lead. Straight Chasers blazing fast, and as long as Skelly breaks, or actually even if Skelly breaks slow, Skelly's going to get sent hard from that outside post. So those are 3 speeds just right there, and you have others that definitely have the ability to be forward. So I think that sets up for a horse from off the pace, who I'm not entirely sure. I want to go keep, diving and make those final opinions here in the next day or two. But I think that is a really deep competitive field. And these sprints, I think, is where you're going to find your prices for the most part of this card on Saturday.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Last race we're going to get into is another one where I think you can find a price, because one of the top choices for most people being Carl Spackler drew out a little ride. Of course, I'm talking about the FanDuel Breeders' Cup Mile. We're on the turf. We're going a mile here. What were your first thoughts seeing this field, Matthew?
I was upset that Carl pulled the 12, only because I was going to toss him no matter where he drew. And now I know everybody else is going to toss him because he's out at the 12. And so I was a little bummed about that, though. I mean, come on, as a Caddyshack fan, I root for this horse every single time he runs. But my first impression was a notable speech is an outstanding horse, and 7-2 honestly feels like a pretty honest price on him. And Porta Fortuna, I mean, this is kind of, I don't think the Americans are going to hit the board. In terms of, I just think notable speech, Porta Fortuna and Ramatule on the inside. Those are 3 just absolutely outstanding runners. And now, which one's going to win? Well, that's going to take me a little bit of time to try to figure that out, because this is a really, really competitive field. The other one I'll say that I was a little surprised by was More Than Looks being 20-1. That horse, in my opinion, has been running against race dynamics the last couple of times out against Carl Spackler, who kind of managed to get the perfect trip each of the last 2 times out, both in the Turf Classic as well as in the 4-Star Dave. And so that horse has just always been kind of a hard luck second place runner. I think he's naturally going to get a better run at Carl Spackler and at the leaders than he has before. One of the things that I looked at for Del Mar and diving into the track stats that I do out there is in the 10 turf route Breeders' Cup races that they've hosted in 2017 and 2021, there have been 0 gate-to-wire winners in any of those turf route races. So you want a horse coming from off the pace, and certainly More Than Looks has a strong late kick, and I think it's probably the best American hope to kind of hit the board in this particular race. But Notable Speech is dangerous. Porta Fortuna she's in a whole nother class. And now it's taken on the boys, obviously. So we'll see how that works out. And then you guys, probably see this horse up close and personal. I'll be honest, I was a little surprised Johannes was 9-2. I mean, that's a lot of respect for that horse, who is admittedly the absolute best turf miler on the West Coast, and maybe even better than Carl Spackler in terms of the best turf miler in the country. But that seemed like a lot of respect for that horse to get 9-2 in the morning line.
Yeah, there was a West Coast bias for sure on this morning line in some aspect, whether it's Johannes at 9-2, which yes, Johannes is superbly talented, but does not deserve to be the third choice on this line over horses like, More Than Looks we can kind of forgive, but Carl Spackler, Diego Velasquez, who I want to talk about in a second here, because
I forgot about him. Jesus.
And you notice the jockey on there. We've talked about what this jockey is going to do, and we know, the four post for Diego Velasquez is phenomenal, and anywhere close to 8-1, obviously, is supremely playable price. But to stick with Johannes just for a second, Johannes is going to be forward, going to be probably sitting a little off of Goliad, but I just don't think this horse is going to have it down the lane. Has not faced anywhere near the caliber that he's going to be facing here today. And then More Than Looks I love at the 20-1 price. I told Howard Kravitz of the HHH Racing channel, who also loves this horse, this is my reverse tri-key horse. I'm going to key this horse everywhere underneath. Because I think that he might just be left with a little too much to do when they get to the top of the stretch. We've seen it work, though, in the past. We've seen those runs be successful, but the Del Mar stretch is pretty short. So that does concern me, because he really does, once he gets going, he is flying. But if he loses too much ground on the far turn, and then I just don't know what the kick is going to look like coming down the lane, but I think he's definitely going to get a piece of it. But the 4, 6, and 7 with the 3, top kind of Euro contingents, with respect as well to the 1 Remetoile, I think are probably going to be in your exacta without a doubt. And maybe you might get a decent price on at least one of those, and I'm hoping the one is Diego Velasquez.
Yeah, and it's funny to think that Ryan Moore and Aidan O'Brien could be a price, but it just speaks to how deep the field is in this particular spot. And just to speak to Notable Speech, I mean, really the last time out you can forgive going over soft ground at Longchamp, and that's usually kind of a line through when you're looking at a lot of these European runners. And outside of that, the only other time the horse lost was going a mile straight at the St. James Palace during Royal Ascot. And we should say trainer Charlie Appleby has had a rough go of it at Royal Ascot the last couple of years. I think he's over the last 2 years with all of his runners there. So, maybe just not really firing in those spots, but was the 3-2 favorite in that particular race, but obviously bounced back and won the Sussex Stakes at Goodwood after that. So just a really, really good horse, and I think a deserving favorite. I understand that being a tepid favorite, but this horse has really answered the bell in a lot of spots, is traveling overseas or out of Europe for the first time, I should say. And William Buick, we gave a lot of love to Ryan Moore. We got to give a lot of love to, as I refer to him up here in New York, as Billy Buick. You got to give that a little bit of a nickname. And I also call Charlie Appleby Chucky Apples, because that feels like a name that you would give to somebody in New York. So Chucky Apples and Billy Buck, they're a pretty good combination riding. But, it's going to be a great race. And, I think if you can get anywhere near 8-1 on Diego Velasquez, fire away.
Definitely. Davey Lane was on, who's an extremely good European punter, was on the HHH Racing Network, did an interview or a show with Howard, and he mentioned some notes on Diego Velasquez that really built some confidence. And that was he won the grade 2 last out. There were a couple, instances where he was looking to ship over here up
Yeah.
at Saratoga,
Yeah.
where I forget the race, but it got canceled that day, so they
Yep.
canceled the ship. And then he was going to race at Kentucky Downs, and they canceled that. And the ownership group decided to just kind of save him for one ship over here for the Breeders' Cup, pointing to this race, and then they're going to keep him in training for next year as well. But they wanted this one to be the kind of one to finish out the year, so he didn't use all of his energy in that last race, and this is the one they pointed to. So anywhere close to 8-1, this horse is guaranteed to be coming here, pointing towards this effort, looking for his best effort. So that is a big vote of confidence. And then a horse that I've heard a lot about is Geoglyph, the Japanese runner, right to the inside. So 20-1 seems like too big a price to take. And we've seen them take down races on the turf, like Love's Only You last time the race was back in Del Mar.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, all these Japanese runners are very live. I think so many of them across the 2 days, whether you're talking about Awesome Result in the Distaff, American Bikini, and the Juvenile fillies, whether you're obviously talking about the Triumvirate and the Classic between Forever Young, Derma, and Ushba, and a horse like Geoglyph, has been knocking around for a long time, and a horse that I've been following for a long time, whether running in the Middle East, running in Hong Kong, running in Japan, has definitely racked up the frequent flyer miles and has been going up against grade 1, grade 2 competition every single time out. So like we talked about before, more of a battle tested horse, and 20-1. Yeah, certainly seems like a generous price on a horse that's made the rounds and faced some of the best like Equinox over the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh man. I never forget Equinox last year. I was very close to buying a ticket to go up to Santa Anita to watch that Breeders' Cup if he came over, because that was a horse that you stayed up late to watch. You changed your plans around just to watch that horse run. I remember I was hosting a party at the last house I was at with my three friends, and I had an alarm on my phone for the Tenno show stakes, and my alarm went off, and obviously we were mid-party. I took one of my buddies, and we went into just like the other room there where it was a little more quiet. We just propped the phone up and we watched him romp at 1-9 or whatever it was. But that was just one of those horses that you can't miss.
He really was. And I will now show you my age and also my East Coast bias. I set my alarm, went to sleep, woke up at 2:30 in the morning and turned on to watch that race as well. Because on the East Coast, I'm like, listen, I'd love to stay up until like 3:30, but that's not happening all the time. And so I'm just like, all right, listen, I'm going to bed. I'm setting the alarm. I'd wake up. I mean, he was about the only horse I would do that for in terms of waking up. But I mean, listen, I'll say this. I woke up real early on the East Coast, and I don't know about you. That's probably way too early for you guys on the West Coast, but I woke up early to watch Derma and Ushba and Forever Young run their final prep races at about 7 a.m. Here on the East Coast. I mean, these Japanese horses, there's an enthusiasm about them. The fact they're bringing so many over, they brought 19 over. I don't know if all 19 drew in, but they had 19 come over in the pre-entries. And I just think it's great. I think it's one of the great advantages of having the Breeders' Cup out on the West Coast is you get so many more Japanese horses coming in. And hopefully when, eventually when the new Belmont Park is constructed, and we can maybe host the Belmont or host the Breeders' Cup at Belmont. I know we've already had, conversations with the JRA and Japanese associations. We'd love to be able to get so many more Japanese horses over here to New York as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would make for another stellar Breeders' Cup card for sure. And you mentioned three runners, Ushba Tesoro, Derma Sotogake, and Forever Young. So we might as well talk about the Breeders' Cup Classic just real quick while we have you here, while we're talking about it. Needed to get your thoughts first. It's a 14-horse field. That is exceptional. That is a great thing to see for the sport. Normally we're accustomed to the 8-horse fields or whatever for the Classic because there's some standout, whether that's Flightline or, I mean, really that was about it. Other than that, I couldn't really think of one in the past 5 or so years. But now we get a horse. We get a 14-horse field. A horse that I know you are familiar with. The number 9, Fierceness. That I was really hoping he was going to draw worse than the 9. I think the 9 is one of the best positions he could have drawn. But what were your first thoughts seeing this field? And what are your thoughts on Fierceness here?
Yeah, I think Fierceness drew very, very well. Certainly Arthur Girai drawing to the outside of him is going to try to cross and clear, but otherwise Johnny Velasquez kind of has that perfect spot because Sierra Leone's going to drop back, Tapatrice is going to drop back. Newgate has good but not elite speed. Next, Next might stay in the 14 path the whole way around, just run a mile and a half, despite the fact that the race is a mile and a quarter. To the hell with it. And so the Axeman might just keep him out there. I don't know. It might be the best strategy for him. But it is interesting to see, because otherwise, like I said, if Arthur's ride is intentional, which he has to be because he needs the lead, everybody else can rate a little bit. And so Arthur's ride goes straight to the front. If Fierceness is in a perfect stalking trip, presumably at that point, which is where he ran so well in the Travers, Forever Young is interesting on the inside. My concern with Forever Young is if you watch the Japan Dirt Classic, what happened as soon as he was in on the inside rail that day as well? What happened? Stumbles out of the gate. He didn't break particularly well in the Saudi Cup either, or the Saudi Derby, I should say. He has gate issues. You guys know this out on the West Coast. You stumble out of the gate on the inside rail, you're running 7th or 8th. You're not making it up to the lead the way that he did in the Japan Dirt Classic, where he was sitting second basically after stumbling at the break. So Yoshida Yahagi's got to have that horse ready to fire out of the gate there. He's got good early speed, and as long as he can sit kind of 4th or 5th in the early going, then I think he's in an okay spot. But he's one that, like I said, has a lot of talent. And then I'll probably be playing against City of Troy. A horse that is trying something for the very first time in terms of trying dirt. If you're going to give me 5-2 on a horse like that, I'm probably going to pass every single time. He's supremely talented. It would be a great story, but it's hard for me to swallow that short of a price on a horse that's trying to do something that he's never done before.
Absolutely. City of Troy also drawing the 3. They want to be forward, you'd have to imagine.
Yes.
That's going to use a lot of gas in that tank. You'd have to think Mixto has kind of one way to go. Obviously, the Pacific Classic is what it is this year, but this horse does his best running towards the front. He's not going to clear Arthur's ride by any means, but he's going to be forward. Forever Young from the inside. Highland Falls, we saw, took it to Arthur's ride in the Jockey Club, and that kind of made Highland Falls almost a new animal. He ran really well in that and kind of showed a new dimension. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know where Fierceness is going to sit, but I'm not touching 3-1 on that horse. This might be foolish, and I don't think I'm going to touch him at 8-1. But I love Next. A 14 is a ridiculous post to draw. The only good that can come of this is you have the kind of dirt shoot at Del Mar plus the entire length of the stretch. So he might be able to get a decent amount of position. He has some speed. I'm holding on to one little fraction that I see, and that was at Churchill Downs in a 1.5 mile race earlier this year. He went 2:03 to the 1.25 miles, and I don't know it's going to be sensationally faster than that for the finish. I'm thinking it's somewhere in the 2:01, and obviously that's only at the quarter. That's before he kind of hits the acceleration coming down the stretch. So that's the tiny bit of hope I'm hanging on to that Next has a shot. He's one of my favorite horses in training. I've been talking since like June or July how I want to see this horse run in the Classic this year because he's buried everybody else in the marathon field. So that's all I'm holding on to hope for Next.
But listen, he's a great horse to root for. I'm so glad the Connections are taking this shot rather than going to the turf, which they talked about, where I think they would have no chance, just going up against the top European runners and some of the top Americans. And listen, I joked about staying out in the 14 path, but the one advantage that he does have, even if he's hung wide, he can run for days. That's never been that's not the issue. I mean, he doesn't mind giving up ground. And to some extent, I think you could make the same argument with a horse like Sierra Leone or Tapit Trice, who both drew further outside. Both of them have more than enough ability to run for days. Now, they're going to probably drop out the back, or certainly Sierra Leone is going to drop out the back of the field and just, probably make a hard left-hand turn out of the gate and just try to save as much ground as he can and to make that one big run. But listen, you mentioned Highland Falls. That's an interesting horse at 20-1. Now, I know Flavian's on Sierra Leone. I think Louis Saez is up on Highland Falls. But if he can get anywhere close to replicating what he did in that Jockey Club Gold Cup, listen, that horse is also bred to run for days. Curling up top out of the 2006 Distaff winner Round Pond. This horse has been a late developing horse, like so many Curlins, and I just feel like it's flown under the radar for most of the year. And because the horse never even, didn't debut until halfway through a 3-year-old season, that people always just kind of discounted him. He could be a really serious horse if he takes another step forward from that Jockey Club Gold Cup.
He absolutely could be. And are we really going to let a Saez, Brad Cox, Godolphin trio get away at 20-1 in a dirt route? I don't know.
No.
I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah, nuts.
This obviously, goes without saying, a 14-horse field, that's a deeply competitive race. I'm not going to take a short price on Fierceness ever, and I'm not going to take a short price on City of Troy doing this for the first time. Sierra Leone and Flavien Prat is interesting. You finally get 12-1, which is, I think, what this horse deserves to be at this point, with just kind of what he showed. I want to see how the track plays on Friday or Thursday, Friday, and maybe the early parts of Saturday. My buddy Noah Maher, we're on Pacific Horse Players on HHH channel, went over the track profile for Del Mar, and 9 of the 11 dirt routes that they've run in the Breeders' Cup have been won at the quarter pole. So that's something to consider. Obviously, it's a pretty short stretch, so kind of whoever's going at the quarter pole is going to keep going. So no one kind of knows the Del Mar track in general better than Flavien Prat, as he wiped the floor with every jockey out here so much that he had to go and set the stakes record at Saratoga. So
exactly.
You have to imagine he knows Sierra Leone. Obviously, he's kind of stopped the lugging in issue that has kind of plagued him in the early part when he was kind of immature and kind of growing into himself. But his last run did look a lot more mature. I believe it was in the Travers. Looked a lot more mature. Kind of stayed the straight course. So I want to see what he does here. 12-1, I think, is going to be too big of a price for me to leave out of, second or third in here. I don't know that he can get up top, but I think he can get a piece for, especially at a price like that.
Yeah, I think he's been burning money the last 3 times out. And so I do think that if you're going to bet on him, now's the time to do it, because you're actually going to get a price, to your point, Ryan. And the other thing I'll say is, and you mentioned how good Flavien knows that track, you really have to make the move around the turn. You can't wait till you're at the top of the stretch to let loose. And, you're not going to be able to get away with it. And so the key for him is he's got to be able to be in a position to only be a couple lengths back, basically, by the time you get to the top of the stretch. And then he can go, but you've got to make that move around the turn. And that's actually why I like a horse. I know it's in a juvenile race, but that's why I like a horse like Chancellor McPatrick on Friday, because of what I saw him do in the Champagne, where Flavien did the exact same thing and made a sweeping move around the turn. And then, yes, he's a deep closer, but when he turned for home, he only had 1 horse to beat. And so that's the sort of run you need to make around the turn. There's a theory that's out there that I've heard percolate amongst the Sierra Leone contingent that he just didn't like Saratoga, that he didn't like the kickback, he didn't like the dirt up there. He wouldn't be the first horse not to like it. He won't be the last. So, maybe there was something to that in terms of why he couldn't get home in some of those races. Maybe he was just bothered by the conditions in the track, etc. We'll see. But 12-1, interesting price on a horse that is supremely talented and never missed the board.
Definitely. If he's a horse that doesn't like kickback, he has a tough running style to combat that. But the Del Mar kickback isn't much more than just, some beach sand being thrown your way. Right. I want to turn over to Jackson real quick before we wrap up. Again, thank you for all the time, Matthew. Jackson, what were your thoughts on that classic field?
I don't like the draw for Forever Young or City of Troy. I mean, they both have major question marks about getting forward, and you got to be forward on this racetrack. I don't know how they're going to break. It's just the rail is not good when the 14-horse field. I liked your idea about next a little bit. I love the 14, actually. I hate 8-1. I would never, ever bet him 8-1. I'm rooting for him really hard, but he's got to be like 20-1, I feel like. But he's going to get that 3-wide stocking trip, which he does every single time, going a mile and a half. So I don't hate it for him. I mean, I just don't know if he's good enough. That's what we're going to find out. I mean, I'm really excited he's in the race. So, the biggest thing I really don't think there's a lot of speed in there. I really don't. I mean, Fierceness is fast, but he's not like a speed demon. He does his best work when he's, stalking a slower pace. The one time it was really on a hot pace was in the Derby, and we all saw what he did in the Derby. We saw Arthur's Ride last time finally go really fast the first time, and he got beat on the square by Highland Falls. And I really think Highland Falls got the best of the draw, because now he has to go from that inside, and his best race ever was when he went straight to the front and just kept going. So I don't think any of these deep closers have any chance. It's whoever whatever one of these horses is more for than they usually are is the one that's going to take advantage and probably win this race. I have no idea who it's going to be, but that's my takeaway from this draw.
I agree. It could definitely be a horse, another Japanese horse, Dermasotogake or Ushpachasoro. They can kind of sit and they can make a good run. It's going to depend. I'm really curious because you mentioned Chancer McPatrick, Matthew, in that run in the Champagne. You kind of have the same jockey, you have the same trainer, and you have the same style of horse with Chancer and Sierra. So he's going to definitely test it out to see if that move works with Chancer because you have to. That's his running style. And if it doesn't work, I mean, maybe you think Pratt makes some sort of backside move with Sierra in the Classic. Do something if it's something where Chancer has the run and just doesn't quite get there. I don't know. Maybe that's overthinking it, but you'd have to think he has two shots on a deep closer that is probably on raw talent the most talented in the field. I think is an argument you can make.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think Chancer might be slightly more dynamic than Sierra Leone in terms of, I think Sierra Leone is more of a grinder to some extent, but I think you're right that it would be interesting to see if he makes that more like Oaklawn middle move that we're used to seeing in Oaklawn, where jockeys make that move down the back stretch to really get in position on the turn, going into the turn rather than making the move around the turn. So, they're going to have a shot to do it on Friday and then see what we can wheel back on Saturday to see if they can do it again. So, going to be a really fun race. And, in a lot of ways, Jackson, to your point, feels like a jockey's race. It feels like who's going to take the initiative. And Luis Saez is a jockey who can be aggressive out of the gate with Island Falls. Obviously Johnny V is always going to be aggressive with a horse like Fierceness, is going to make sure that horse is forward. Junior knows he's only got one way to win. But you're right. Outside of that, there's not a lot of speed necessarily, or in terms of horses that need to be on the lead. And so it'll be interesting to see who gets there. And to your point, Ryan, earlier, you got the whole stretch to kind of figure it out. So they're going to have a long run into that first turn to figure out who's going to actually get to the front.
It's definitely going to be intriguing. The Classic is about in the middle of the card on Saturday, and then we have an excellent card at the back end of that. 2 amazing days, 14 awesome races. Matthew, I can't thank you enough for joining. We have 3 more days until we get it started. So we are, it's like almost the night before Christmas for about 3 nights, or, the night before your birthday as a kid where you're just like, okay, you wake up like, oh, is it go time yet? No. Okay. One more night. Like you just gotta finish up everything, and we're getting there. But thank you again for joining. That was excellent analysis by you on all those races. So I really appreciate the time.
No, absolutely. Anytime, fellas. And I'll be out there on Wednesday. So hopefully I'll see you around at the track and see you out there.
Absolutely, you will. We'll be there I'll be there Thursday through Sunday and every other race day because I'm about 20 minutes away from the track, but definitely hope to see you out there. That'd be a real treat. And take care. Have a safe journey out here.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Jackson, take care.
Have a good one. All right. That was, of course, Matthew DeSantis over at NYRA. Awesome to hear him and get his analysis. Thanks, everybody, for watching. It's been about an hour and a half. Matthew gave us a full hour, which cannot thank him enough. That was super generous of him. Jackson, what are your thoughts on the whole all the races we covered today? We jumped ahead a little bit into some races, but I couldn't help myself.
There's a lot going on. I'm trying to dissect it all still. My post positions, or who's just gonna get the lead. There's a lot of things are happening quick. So it's fun. It's gonna be long 3 days though, like you said, to wait a little longer though.
It is. I almost like that I kind of get to have tomorrow and I get to have Wednesday to just kind of slowly finish these opinions up. I don't need to rush for anything. And that's a pretty good lead in for our show tomorrow. It'll be show 4 of 4. We have Matt Dinnerman joining us at 4 p.m., which is when the show starts, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then we have Matt Bernier, another excellent handicapper, obviously on FanDuel TV and NBC Sports. Really excited to talk with them. We're going to talk the Breeders' Cup Turf, the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, the Distaff, which is now maybe a 1 or 2 horse race, but we'll kind of get into that because I like the Japanese horse a little bit. In there as a bit of a teaser. And then, of course, we're going to talk in depth about the Breeders' Cup Classic. So I can't wait to do all that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I have been your host, Ryan Anderson. This has been Jackson Maher. Wow. Long week, man. I'm sorry. Jackson Muniz. Jackson Muggsy Muniz, as he's known. And by the way, a quick shout out to Watchtower for being the greatest horse.
We're saving that story for another time. I'm going to tell it eventually. I'm waiting for the right time.
All right. Well, until tomorrow, we will see you. Take care and best of luck. Peace.